Egypt is all set to host the upcoming UN Climate Summit, but in the latest, the country's regime has come under the scanner after a series of arrests were made in connection with the calls for protests. Now, the series of arrests renewed the alarm and the concerns about the regime's dire human rights record. And this was put in the spotlight after the Egyptian security forces arrested an Indian climate activist on Sunday afternoon. This man, identified as Ajit Rajagopal, is an architect and activist from Kerala in South India. He was arrested shortly after setting off on an 8-day walk from Cairo to Sharm el-Sheikh as part of a global campaign to raise awareness about the climate crisis. Rajagopal was walking alone, holding a white paper sign calling for climate justice at COP27. And he was detained at a security checkpoint, apparently for not having obtained prior authorization to protest.
In a walk of an hour, maybe I have covered 4 to 5 kilometers in the traffic police checkpost. They stopped me having a placard and walking on the road, and they took my passport and for checking in my phone, and they called my host, who is a lawyer from Obur. Around 1 o'clock, they took us to the police station, and it was a continuous interrogation for another 4 hours.
Both the men were arrested and detained by the authorities. Rajagopal was detained for almost 27 hours, while his host was held for more than 24 hours, reportedly for not having told the police about the Indian activist's intentions. The two were later released on Monday afternoon, but their detention highlights the daily repression and surveillance that is faced by ordinary Egyptians as the global community prepares to descend on Sharm el-Sheikh this weekend. Moreover, the Egyptian Commission for Rights and Freedoms, one of the few independent human rights groups still operating in the country, has condemned these arrests and said that it was a clear sign that the regime was unwilling to tolerate even the most basic form of protest.
We were expecting that as Egypt hosts COP27, the security grip would be eased on all forms of political activism in Egypt and openness in the public sphere. But this has not happened. What we see is toughening of the security grip, even on the civilians passing by on the streets, and interference in their personal lives and breaching their privacy by forcing them to open up their mobile phones and inspecting their political views.
Although in the run-up to COP27, Egyptian authorities have made it clear that protests will only be permitted in a purpose-built area away from the conference center, where the world leaders will be making life and death decisions on climate action. And with us on the broadcast this minute is Svein Tvedal from Norway. Svein is the director Clima 2020 and former UN director. Thanks very much for being here. Let me begin by asking you for your reaction to what's happened in Egypt in the run-up to the COP27 summit. And we're talking about the basic right to actually voice your opinion that has now, unfortunately, been clamped down upon. What do you make of that?
No, as far as I know about it, I think this is not an acceptable reaction from government. You know, the civil society is an extremely important stakeholder in the climate discussion. So the possibility to have free and open demonstrations in connection with these events is extremely important if we should solve the climate problem. I don't think there is doubt about that. So the thing now, as far as I understand, that demonstrations is only allowed in designated areas and so forth, is something that is not a necessary thing to do, as we have seen from very many of the other COPs. So, in my view, when you allow a host country to be the host for the conference, I think these things should be sorted out in behalf. We can explain, we can compare a little bit with the Qatar and the soccer, the football championship. It has put focus on human rights in Qatar, and maybe the good thing about what we see now, even if it is not good for the COP, is that this issue about suppressing human rights is coming up on the table in Egypt. So just to answer your question another time, it is not acceptable to stop civil society to come up with their views in a peaceful way.
Right. Let's also talk about the expectations from this climate summit. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of pledges, a lot of commitments that have been made on the climate front, but a huge gap when it comes to these translating into action. So naturally, there is skepticism attached to this summit as well. Yeah,
it is quite clear that when we look on the pledges that has been forwarded by the parties, the governments, what will happen in Egypt now is that there will not be any decisions that in a way will reduce the emissions. So after the COP, the emissions will continue to rise. And that means that the threat and damage to the poor people, the poor countries, will be even worse in the future. You can imagine what the representative from Pakistan will say when he is on the stage in Egypt. So one thing that is important with this COP is that the issue about loss and damage is coming higher up on the agenda. And if the host country wants to have some kind of a victory on this COP, I think to come up with a trustworthy solution on the relations around loss and damage, and also to, in a way, maybe have a financing mechanism ready for the next COP in a year, that would be a possible and good decision at this conference.
All right, Sven, we're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.